Yes, and as celebrations are underway today, it is in fact a year of celebrations. His Highness Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the president of the UAE, declared 2021 as a whole as the year of the 50th to commemorate 50 years since the nation's founding, of course, back in 1971. And the celebratory year also coincides with the UAE's hosting of Expo 2020. So now let's cross now live to our Bastian Boria, I24 News Dubai correspondent. Bastian, events and atmosphere at the UAE Expo Pavilion must be really special today.
Extremely unusual crowd behind me, Ellie. We knew that this expo was already crowded, but this crowd is definitely unusual. Tens of thousands of people coming to see the events tonight at the UAE Pavilion. The land of the dreamers who do. This is the slogan, the formula with which visitors from all over the world are welcomed here at the Emirati Pavilion, placed, as you can imagine, in the middle of the expo, visible almost immediately as soon as you pass the entrance, right behind me, with this imposing size in architecture. A building that was designed by a Spanish-Swiss architect, Santiago Calatrava, who also designed, for the record, the Lyon train station in France and the Valencia Opera House. And a building that opens up, not now, but we will see it opening up, that spreads its wings once the night falls. You can see it behind me, supported by cables, and supposed to represent the animal emblem of the country, the falcon. And inside, 6 rooms, 6 different atmospheres that reprise the history of the UAE. From the time in the 60s when the population was relatively poor, mostly illiterate, when medicine was almost non-existent. From this period of the 70s also, the discovery of the first oil deposits, the unification of the 7 Emirates after the decolonization of the British Empire, until today. A politically stable country which seeks at all costs to diversify its economy by becoming less dependent on oil revenues. The Emirates of Dubai actually is a good example. Only 5% of the Dubai economy depends on oil, with authorities managing, as you can see, to focus on services, on tourism, on environment, and so on.
Right. Before we dive in a bit further here in studio about the history of the UAE, Bastian, I can imagine that other events are taking place in the city today and later on this evening. Give us the highlights.
It's now or never, Ellie. Announcements, flags are everywhere in the streets, but also sculptures. We see many of them representing a hand with this sign. It is a symbol here. You have the V of victory, the W of win, and the L of love. Many high-ranking political personalities use it here, and it was naturally chosen as the emblem of this 50th anniversary. And for the rest, performances by local international artists, speeches, poetry readings, horse parades, military band, light shows, synchronized drone fireworks, and then a vintage car race also on an open road, a replica of the mythical Italian Mille Miglia race. This will be from December the 5th, starting in Abu Dhabi, finishing in Ras Al Khaimah at the very end of the UAE in the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, Bastian, I suspect you've earned this celebration today, fair and square, as you've been taking us in the corridors of the Expo 2020 throughout the past week. So thank you for this report, and go celebrate. We'll be back with you later on in the evening. And joining me now in studio is Mr. Danny Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, former Israeli deputy foreign minister. Hello, Danny. Thank you for coming on today. So let's go down memory lane for a bit. Talk to us a bit about the making of the UAE, and then we'll perhaps talk about the future prospect. But how did it come to being 50 years ago?
So the UAE and the other principalities or emirates in the Gulf were all under British mandate, or basically they were colonies. Yes, absolutely. And just as Britain in the 20th century began to shed off all its colonies and mandates, they were the second wave. Here in Israel, Jordan, we were the first wave. India was, and Pakistan, first wave. They came only 20 almost years later in 71. And I think they are now an amalgamation of their culture. You know, ancient culture, desert culture, and you could see it in the Debka dances.
Big emphasis in the celebrations on that feature.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But also, the British, they were quite orderly, and they left a whole bureaucracy, a British administration, so which also helped them very much. The only one thing that they didn't keep was the common law, because they have the Sharia law.
Right.
But other than that...
But that's a tremendous change if we're talking about
Absolutely.
the culture in the streets, about how it affected the ordinary people, per se.
Absolutely. And always they had to carve their way because, as a small country, pretty much sandwiched between two huge ones, the Shia in Iran and the Sunni in Saudi Arabia. Of course, it was no-brainer because they are mostly, unlike in Bahrain, they are mostly all Sunnis, so of course they ally themselves with Saudi Arabia, with everything that it entails, but they also have their own independent
Foreign policy,
hence the Abraham Accord. When they really leaped forward, they were the first one.
But it's hard to imagine, and now we know we don't need to imagine that they did not receive a green light, so to speak, from Saudi Arabia before doing that. But let's stay with history for a bit longer before we dive into current affairs, Danny. So what happened during those first years? How do you start to build a nation that's perhaps similarly to Israel, but in a different way, spawned by different cultures, different types of communities and people? How do you...
So I would say, unlike Israel, which we had to start everything from scratch, it's a country without any natural resources. The area itself, not necessarily Dubai, but if you add all the Emirates around them, they are rich with fossil energy, the oil. And since the combustion engine was developed, this area came all in prominence. A lot of money poured in. And in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, they used the money quite judiciously, I would say. So they built an infrastructure for tourism, with hotels, with roads, with entertainment parks. And everything is very much amenable to tourists from all over the world, Europe, the United States, and anywhere else. And they have also, in a responsible way, they have a lot of cash and they have a lot of reserves, and they put it into a sovereign fund. So the sovereign fund is a real great cushion for any eventualities or any economic crisis in the future. Their people are quite happy. They're not, I would say, under guidelines.
Troubled with daily affairs.
Yes, for instance, in Saudi Arabia, they're very much under the guidelines of Islam. But in the Emirates, they're much more liberal. So also there is the influence of the Western influx of
well,
tourists.
This is perhaps a perfect point to make a slight pause, Danny. Go back to the ceremony, and we'll continue our conversation in a few minutes. Let's go back to Dubai.
النخل تتغنى بساقيها، زايد الكرم والجود، بك الأرض انفرجت أساريرها، زينتها وزنتها، بيض الله وجه راعيها.
الحقيقة أنا أؤكد لكم وعاهد الله على الإخلاص والجد في كل ما يسر المواطن والوطن والأبناء
لنقف جميعا لتنشد قلوبنا عيشي بلادي. يبدأ الآن النشيد الوطني الإماراتي.
إيمانا منا بأن لف الشمل والتآزر بين الأخوة هو فضيلة كبيرة يحقق السعادة للأمة حاضر ومستقبل، ولذلك قصدنا الاتحاد والوحدة.
أحرف اسمها تسلي قلبي قاريها على الكواكب بدينا اليوم نقرا البدر بالحب كل ليلة يمسيها البدر كل يوم يطلع من ثناياها
عزيزتي نور المطروشي في المستقبل، أحلم بأن أنظر إلى الأرض من الفضاء، فيا ترى كيف هي شكل بلادي من السماء؟ أريد أن أصل إلى القمر وجميع الكواكب. المستقبل هو الفضاء يا نورة، عديني أن تصبحي رائدة فضاء. عزيزتي ميثا بوغنوم في المستقبل، تمكنا اليوم من إنقاذ سلحفاة صغيرة من شبكة صيد، لكننا رأينا حيوانات قليلة وأسماك أقل. أين هي الأسماك يا ترى؟ عندما أكبر سأحمي حيواناتنا جميعها لتشعر بالأمان في بلد الأمان.
مستحيل ما عندنا للمستحيل أنا للمجد قلب للمصير عيون ما عندنا مستحيل
عزيزتي طفول النعيمي، أحب الطبيعة جدا بتفاصيلها التي لا تعد ولا تحصى. كيف يا ترى أستطيع حد جميع أوراق الشجر في العالم وتلك حبات الرمل التي تزين شواطئنا؟ كم عددها؟ عندما أكبر سأتعلم عد وجمع كل شيء في العالم لأكتشف أسرار هذا الكون الجميل.
نقف لها وعندها الليلة والسلام حولنا والجبال أحضان. 50 عاما من أنامل نسجت الطبيعة بالعلم. 50 عاما كنا ونبقى وطن الإنسان.
بنجدد المشوار 50 عام بنجدد المشوار والحلم أصبح له أسس وركون هذا وطن واحنا حماة الدار ونموت ونترابه المصيون هذه بلاد العزم والأصرار والصعب فيها بالعزوم يهون والصعب فيها بالعزوم
Yes, so we are wishing a very happy 50th anniversary to the UAE from here in the Jaffa port, from the I-24 News team. I would like to thank, of course, Mr. Danny Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., for being here with me. So again, congratulations, happy celebrations, and we will leave you with some of those remarkable images of this spectacular show this hour at the United Arab Emirates. Thanks for watching.
Está bueno. Te venimos a Bolsones.
Mucho en Maturín.
Baja, renacer. Máquina.
We're on the inside of political and religious passions in Jerusalem, breaking down the financial trends shaping the global economy, giving you key context, not just headlines, with the stories from Israel that touch the U.S. and those across the region with impact far beyond its borders. Catch the rundown where the Middle East meets the world.
Israel Business Weekly is sponsored by the PLFA Foundation.
Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. It is time.